now. Okay.
Ready?
Ready.
Welcome to the Chicago Writers Association Annual Book Awards presentation. I'm P. Ferry, and I am the administrator of the awards this year. With me tonight are amongst our contestants, Randy Richardson, who is the president of the Chicago Writers Association, and Samantha Hoffman, who's our vice president and our secretary. All three of us would like to thank Susie Takas of the Bookseller, Cellar, at 4736 North Lincoln Avenue in Chicago for making the arrangements for this presentation and generously allowing us to use her Zoom account. Our awards are usually presented at her bookstore, the Bookseller, Cellar, at 4736 North Lincoln, and we hope that they will be again next year. In the meantime, all of our award-winning books are on sale and available at the Bookseller, Cellar, or online at booksellerinc.com. So you can order them anytime, including during the presentations tonight. Now we're ready to start the show. In the category of independent nonfiction, the winner is Gary Johnson, and his book called Luck is a Talent. Of Mr. Johnson's book, the judge, Mary Solinger, writes, Gary has given us a close-up view of our convoluted legal system and how human complexities can make a difference in and outside of the courtroom. He is honest about how innocent people can be categorized and prejudged before a trial begins. He also takes us behind the scenes to show how frustrating the work of a lawyer can be and how long a case can take to try. Anyone who is thinking of a career as a lawyer or who is curious about how our legal system with its many challenges works should read Gary's book, Luck is a Talent. We've asked Gary to read an excerpt tonight, and so I will turn it over to him. Gary Johnson.
Thank you very much. I'll read in a minute. I want to say a few words up front. First of all, here's the award. It's wonderful, and I want to thank the Chicago Writers Association and the judges for believing that Luck is a Talent is worthy of such a high honor. And when we got emailed that we'd won these awards, the person who emailed us said that we should take particular pride in this year's for this year's winners because the quality of the submissions was so high. So in that vein, I want to also thank my fellow authors who contributed their submissions and made the award all the more memorable. Luck is a Talent. One of the most often asked questions about my book is where did you get that title? Luck is a Talent is a quote from William Somerset Maugham. And I guess it's a tip of the hat to you make your own luck. And while I was lucky throughout my career and throughout the case that was the basis for the book, the legal case that was the basis for the book, Luck is a Talent, I can't escape the fact that throughout my life, I've been very lucky. And that luck continued with the writing of this book, which brings me to two more people I want to give thanks to. The first one is to George Rawlinson, my publisher. And the long and the short of it is that without George's help, I wouldn't be receiving this award tonight. So thank you, George. And the other thanks I want to give is to my wife, Amy, who I want to say she was an inspiration, but she more or less demanded that I write this book. So here I am tonight. So thank you, Amy. Thank you, George. Thank you again, Chicago Writers Association. The part of the book I'm going to read to you takes place after my co-counsel and I have been held in contempt of court by the trial judge that was about to hear our client's case. It was a capital murder case, and we were thrown in jail. November 12th, 1986. I was alone in one of those old-fashioned cells. Unlike the more modern lockups, this one had bars from floor to ceiling. I could hear the correctional officers going about their work around the corner. The only place to sit down was on a bunk bed. My suit jacket, shirt, belt, and tie had been taken from me, so when I climbed up onto the top bunk to lie down, I wasn't able to keep warm. If I was you, I wouldn't put my head directly on that mattress, warned an only slightly sympathetic jail guard. I sat up and scratched my head. There I was, a 33-year-old, never before been arrested criminal defense lawyer, cooling my heels in the old DuPage County, Illinois jail. I, along with my co-counsel, Carol Anfinson, had just been held in contempt of court by Judge Robert Nolan. It occurred during our defense of Steve Buckley, who, along with Rolando Cruz and Alex Hernandez, had been falsely accused of kidnapping, raping, and murdering a 10-year-old girl from Naperville, Illinois. It was one of the most publicized cases in Illinois history. Steve's first trial had ended in a hung jury over a year and a half earlier, and the events which led up to our being jailed happened as we were attempting to schedule a retrial date. I paced back and forth in my cell. Have we just irretrievably screwed up Steve's case, I wondered? No, Judge Nolan had badgered and bullied us long enough. We had to stand up to him somewhere along the line, and this was as good a place as any to dig our heels in. But how are we going to get a fair trial from that jackass now that he's tossed us in jail? Then I heard Carol's voice from her cell around the corner, out of sight. Who's Vasco da Gama? What's the Amazon River? I listened as she kept rattling off questions. Hey, what's Carol doing over there? I asked one of the guards. She's having coffee and watching Jeopardy. What the? I want to watch Jeopardy too. And how about a cup of coffee for me? Sorry, there's only one TV and we can't let you share a cell with a female. As if I would try to do something untoward with my co-counsel. You can have a book, the guard continued. There was no response to the coffee request. He accompanied me to the lockup's extensive library of about 7 books. I chose The Winds of War and returned to my cell. Sitting on my bunk, I tried reading, but other thoughts, selfish thoughts, began to creep in. I had hopes of someday running for state's attorney in neighboring Kane County, and the consequences of the day's events began to sink in. Fantastic, I thought. I'm sure that mugshot they just took of me will make a great campaign ad for someone. My mind eventually went back to Steve's defense. I mostly thought about the pros and cons of trying to get Nolan off the case. The pros won. After a little over an hour, a guard escorted me out of my cell. We're taking you to the new jail where you'll stay till you can post bond. DuPage County had just built a new sheriff's office and corrections facility a mile or so away. And that was where we were headed, but not before one more act of humiliation. I felt someone messing with my ankles and I looked down. I was being shackled. How the hell did this happen to me? Thank you again, Chicago Writers Association and judges. I appreciate it. And this is an incredible honor. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Gary. Thank you very much. Now, in the category of traditional nonfiction, the winner is Edith, the Rogue, Rockefeller, McCormick by Andrea Friederici Ross. Of Miss Ross's book, Judge Peter Copeland writes, this biography paints a warm and friendly portrait of a woman who should be better known. The author rightly considers her subject a patron saint of Chicago. Among her many causes are a zoo, a hospital, and the opera. Edith Rockefeller McCormick likely would have been a captain of industry, an influential intellectual, or a public figure if only she had not been born a woman in 1872. The book recounts Edith's many accomplishments and frustrating failures. The story includes great tragedy, the loss of 2 young children, and believe it or not, worries about money. The writer makes it possible to imagine Edith as a living, loving, and struggling person, at times admirable, at times frustrating, and occasionally wacky. In many things, Edith was ahead of her time, discovering artists and writers such as James Joyce and backing the psychologist Carl Jung early in his career. The author took strength from Edith and used it to power a 10-year quest exploring libraries and archives in the United States and in Europe. The final draft of the story is a welcome corrective to the unfair treatment of Edith during her life and in the historical record. Here is Andrea Friederici Ross to read from Edith, the Rogue Rockefeller McCormick. Andrea?
Thank you, Pete. Well, like Gary, first of all, I really have to thank the CWA and the bookseller for this honor. I was floored. I didn't even know that Edith had been nominated. And wow, what a bright spot in a pandemic January in Chicago, right? So thank you so much. I would really like to thank my publisher, Southern Illinois University Press, because they made this book better at every step of the process, and I'm very grateful. And to my agent, Ann Devlin, who was a champion for Edith. So I will pick up here in chapter 2. We have established by this point that Edith, who was a daughter of John D. Rockefeller, had a pretty Spartan childhood. And she has met Harold McCormick, who is the son of Cyrus McCormick, the Reaper King, and their wedding is on the horizon. The press took delight in the story. Prince of McCormick Reaper to marry Princess of Standard Oil. Greatest catch of the year. 2 great fortunes to be joined. Journalists estimated Edith's worth at $35 million. It would be the wedding or merger of the decade. Senior made a statement to reporters. Harold Fowler McCormick has known the family and Miss Edith for a good many years, and the engagement is not the result of a sudden acquaintance. Both the young people understand each other thoroughly. We are pleased, and I believe my daughter is happy. For Edith, marriage must have represented liberation from tight parental constraints. No more silly house rules, no more forced marches to the Baptist church. Most of all, with their combined funds, Edith and Harold would finally be free to spend, something that had been denied her thus far. There would be no more counting pennies. Senior insisted the wedding be held at their small Fifth Avenue Baptist Church in New York City. While not ideal for a large ceremony, Edith accommodated his wish by having a special podium built for the occasion and by arranging for the removal of several rows of pews. The open space would be filled by tremendous quantities of palm trees, ferns, orchids, chrysanthemums, and roses. In a year that had seen several lavish, over-the-top society weddings, Edith was determined that hers would be the most tasteful. But fate intervened in grand fashion. Harold came down with pleurisy shortly before the event, and his doctors warned it might turn into pneumonia if he ventured out. Therefore, on the eve of the wedding, telegrams were hurriedly sent out informing the 1,200 invited guests that the ceremony would be a private affair at Harold's Buckingham Hotel bedside. The New York Times helped spread the word with a headline that read, "No ceremony in church. Illness causes change of plans." The reception would take place afterward, as originally planned, at the Rockefeller Mansion on West 54th Street. Neither did Mother Nature cooperate. November 26, 1895, dawned gloomy, and shortly before the noon service, the skies opened up with a deluge, the likes of which New York City hadn't seen in years. It was dark as night at midday, with thunder and lightning, and the streets turned into muddy rivers. At the stroke of noon, the family assembled in the hotel suite with a flushed Harold leaning hard on best man Stanley's shoulder, his eyes feverish and a bead of sweat along his brow. Edith wore an ivory satin gown with a long round train and delicate lace trim at the sleeves and bodice. Harold had given her a diamond tiara, which was used to hold the veil, her sister Bessie's, something old, something new, in place. Around her neck was the gift from her parents, a string of pearls worth $15,000, more than the entire price of Bessie's wedding. Vows were exchanged, the deal was sealed, and only the reception remained. Mother-in-law Nettie later described it. At the appointed time, all except Harold went to the bride's home, where she, with her father by her side, under the canopy of flowers, received hundreds who came to offer their congratulations. This too was a beautiful scene, and Edith was most courageous, feeling keenly not having Harold at her side, yet feeling there was nothing else right to do but to receive the guests. And she stood there calm and sweet and dignified until all the guests had been received. Once everyone had been greeted, Edith donned her going away dress and hightailed it back to the Buckingham, leaving the party in full gear. When she returned to the hotel, both the weather and Harold's fever had broken. The wedding over, though not remotely as Edith had planned. Edith and Harold were husband and wife. Certain great things lay ahead. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That was lovely. Now, in the category of independent fiction, the winner is A Bend in the River by Libby Fischer Hellman. Of Miss Hellman's novel, Judge Dana Killian writes, Hellman crafts a luscious tale of two sisters locked in a traumatic history that defines them, but also tears them apart. Themes of family, the meaning of sisterhood, survival, and forgiveness pull the story forward. The language and setting are rich, the characters intriguing, and the story all the more engaging for its travels through the ravages of war-torn Vietnam. Now, Ms. Hellman is going to read from A Bend in the River.
Thank you, Pete. And I want to join in the chorus of thanks to the Chicago Writers Association. I was flabbergasted when I found out, and just amazed. And in jest, I want to say that you have released me from the curse of being the Susan Lucci of the mystery community. And you know who Susan Lucci was if you were watching soap operas 10 or 15 years ago. Maybe she's still there. I don't even know. Erica. Anyway, now getting down to business here, I'm going to read the first chapter. And are we going to have a chance to talk a little bit more about it later on this evening? Okay, good. So chapter 1, Tom. Is there a warning the moment before life shatters into pieces? A minute shift in the light? The chirr of a monkey? Perhaps a heaviness in the air that tastes like disaster? For Trang Tom and her sister Lin Mai, washing their family's clothes in the river, the warning might have been a barely perceptible scent wafting toward them. Perfumed soap mixed with sweat, unfamiliar, foreign. Or perhaps there was no warning at all. Absorbed in their task, the sisters squatted on a narrow strip of store, scrubbing shirts with their brushes. They slapped heavier items against the rocks, then rinsed everything in the waters of the Mekong. The clothes would dry quickly. The hottest part of the year was approaching, and the combination of summer heat and the monsoons would produce an indolent lethargy that made even washing clothes a burden. Though it was only March, the sisters lifted their hair off the neck to catch the breeze. Tom, at 17, used her non-la as a hamper for the clean clothes. At the moment, it held only 2 pairs of tiny pants belonging to her little brother, Hung Sung, an unplanned surprise 5 years earlier. Hung Sung, an unplanned surprise 5 years earlier, was now the prince of the family. According to their parents, no boy was as handsome, as talented, as lucky. With his arrival, the girls' status declined. They had become afterthoughts to be married off quickly. Sung should not be burdened with his sister's care. When he grew up, he would have enough to do for his own family and his parents. Tom wiped sweat from her brow. Mai, 3 years younger, nattered on, but Tom only half listened. She was about to graduate from the Catholic school 2 villages away, and she was wondering how she would continue her studies. Where would she find the money to pay for university? What would her parents say when she confessed that was her goal? I'm sure you know him, Lun Phuc. He's handsome. His is the wealthiest family in the village, Mai said. Their home has a real roof and windows. His father makes sampans. Mai giggled. I think he likes me, Chitam. I hope Mama and Papa will agree to a match. I can already picture our wedding. Of course, we will honor the rose silk thread god, but it will be modern too. We will have music to dance, and Tom cut in. Mai, you can be a silly girl dreaming about weddings and dancing. This is a man you may live with for the rest of your life. Have you ever shared a conversation? Talked to him about his future, his dreams? She twisted water out of her father's shirt and dropped it into the conical hat. All I hear is that he is the son of a wealthy man and he is handsome. Mai was the beauty of the family, delicate and tiny with large black eyes, silky black hair, and soft skin that glowed white even in shadow. Tom had seen the longing on village boys' faces when she passed. Her parents would have no problem arranging a match for her. Tom was taller, leaner, and while her face had the same classic features as Mai's, they were arranged differently. Her eyes did not appear as large, her nose more pronounced, her skin darker. She was attractive in her own way, but she wasn't a beauty. Although older, she wasn't waiting for an arranged marriage. She wasn't interested. She wanted to study plants, their growth, foliage, colors, blossoms, how they added to their environment or not. Her Catholic science teacher explained to her that what she wanted to study was botany. Mai, who usually deferred to her older sister, drew in a breath. You're a fine one to talk. Do you have a suitor? You reject all the men our parents suggest. Tom sat back on her haunches. When had Mai developed such a sharp tongue? This churlish behavior was new. As Mai's Chi, the older sister, Tom should be treated with respect. She was about to say so when a wisp of smoke passed over them. Tom sniffed. The scent of the smoke was farm-like, clean. The end of the dry season was approaching. A farmer was probably burning leftover corn husks or rotted fruit from his fields, except that most farmers usually fed leftovers to their cattle or pigs. She frowned. Perhaps the smoke came from the dying embers of a campfire around the bend of the river. A fisherman or two cooking breakfast before a long day on the Mekong. A second puff of smoke wafted over them, stronger. This time it carried with it an acidic scent, gasoline. Tom's jaw tightened. She looked over at Mai, whose eyes grew round. Do you smell that? Mai asked. When the third gust of smoke reached them, even more intense, Tom scrambled to her feet and beckoned to Mai. Leave everything. We need to go home.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, Libby. Lovely. A reminder that if you'd like to pass on a comment, you can do so in the chat. And also, if you want to buy a book, try the bookseller inc.com. You can do it online right now. In the category of traditional fiction, the winner is How to Walk on Water by Rachel Swearingen. Of Miss Swearingen's stories, book, Judge Elizabeth Wetmore writes, the 9 stories in Rachel Swearingen's debut collection, How to Walk on Water, are magnificent. With her spare prose and keen insights into her characters' lives, Swearingen truly honors the elegant, noble tradition of the short story. I admire her superb powers of observation and description, her spot-on pacing, and the grace she accords to her characters in all their fragility and weirdness and resilience. Most of all, I admire the careful, honest way Swearingen infuses these stories with dignity, beauty, and wonder. For me, 2 measures of a great collection of stories are, do the stories ring true? And will I wish to revisit them from time to time? In both cases, the answers are resounding yeses. Here's Rachel Swearingen to read from How to Walk on Water.
Thank you, and thank you, Chicago Writers Association. It's such an honor, and congrats to the other awardees and the finalists. And also, thank you so much, Elizabeth Wetmore. I've been reading Valentine. If you haven't read this, the last year's winner, it's absolutely phenomenal, very stunning book. So thank you for those kind words, Elizabeth. I'm going to read from a short story from the middle of the book, and it's called The Only Thing Missing Was the Howling of Wolves. How could my sister, crazy as they come, still coerce me into doing things that could come to no good? She had her 2-year-old grandson, Wendell, in her arms, and he was wearing a baptismal gown. And she was saying, just this once, Harlan, I got it all worked out. No one will ever know except me and you and the good Lord. You won't have to do a darn thing except drive. Lynette had lost her driver's license years ago, and one of her Narconon friends had dropped her and the kid off at my house in the country. There I was trying to install her borrowed car seat in my pickup so I could take her back home. She was like the wild mint in the garden I couldn't eradicate. It kept coming up, sucking the nourishment from everything I planted. Then she was handing me Wendell, installing that seat as if she were born to such things. We got into the truck and she said, "Can't you just feel it? Them birds out there and that breeze, that's God, Harlan. That's God on our side." I pulled away as she stuck her head out the open window and let her newly dyed hair blow. In the back seat, Wendell laughed and I had to look away from the rear view. In that lacy gown with his fine hair flicked to one side, his eyes set too close together, I had to agree with Lynette that his name was a tragedy in the making. She refused to call him Wendell, preferring Scotty Boy instead. "How do you like me as a brunette, Harlan? You didn't even say nothing." For once, her face wasn't made up with 3 layers of paint. She wore a blue dress buttoned primly over her tattoos, not the usual tight shirt and shorts, and I remembered her at 17, pregnant and leaving home with nothing but a pillowcase stuffed with clothes. I was 14 then, and now here we were again, both of us, 46 years later, back in our hometown in Wisconsin. We passed a highway patrolman clocking traffic from his car, and she ducked out of sight. God had set the whole thing in motion, she had said. Ross's wife had called her in a moment of desperation, needing a sitter. We'd have just enough time to get the kid up to a chapel in the woods for a christening she had just that morning rearranged, if only I would take her. "How'd you get the kid, Lynette?" The last time we talked, she told me Ross had stopped speaking to her. She sat up and pretended to notice the Watsons' hobby farm. Just last week, they'd purchased 2 emus. "Holy crap," she said. "What is that? Is that an ostrich?" I stopped in the middle of the road and she braced her hands on the dashboard and looked behind us. "I asked you how you got him." "From his daycare. What do you think? That I kidnapped him?" She made her voice high and whiny and mimicked Wendell's daycare teacher. "You aren't on our list of approved caretakers. As a matter of fact, you're on our list of people who are not allowed to see Wendell. Me, his own grandmother. Can you believe it? I sacrificed Harlan. I gave Ross up so he could live in that big house and never even think of me." We were just 2 miles from town. I started driving again, slowly, and strained my ears. I thought I heard sirens and I pulled onto a tractor path that led into a cornfield so I could think. Wendell was strangely quiet and Lynette noticed me watching him in the rear view. "I just gave him a little Benadryl," she said, "just to relax him. He won't be any trouble and we'll have him back in a jiffy." "Don't say another word, Lynette," I said. "I don't want to know anything else." By now, the daycare had called Ross and Ross had called the cops. Soon someone would put 2 and 2 together and they'd be looking for me too. Someday they're going to write about me, Harlan. You could be part of history too, part of the underground baptism railroad. They're everywhere. People just like me, only I'll be the mother of the railroad. "You kidnapped him, Lynette. That's a felony." Stupid daycare people. I would have never put Ross or Caleb there. I left them with people I knew. Ross had told me about some of the people Lynette left them with. Biker chicks high on speed, a senile neighbor, men she'd known for a few days. She'd lived on a commune near Nashville. She had helped run a bar out in Wyoming. She had hitchhiked with her kids across the country, losing her youngest in an apartment fire in Eugene, Oregon, while she was out partying, then giving her son Ross to an aunt to raise back home. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you're making? I don't need this now, Lynette." Lynette turned in her seat and gave me a hard stare. "I ain't doing this for you, Harlan. I'm doing this for Scotty Boy." Her voice lowered and she shuddered as she talked about how the world was dying of spiritual decay because of our generation and how it was time for us to stick out our necks and take a stand. "Let me tell you about our generation," I wanted to say. "While you were swallowing tabs of acid and partying, I was on a gunboat dodging sniper fire from the banks of the Song Kalan." She went on and on about birds that fell from the sky and dead fish that washed ashore, how we'd polluted and destroyed everything, all for the love of money. "Kids like Scotty are in for a world of hurt," she said, "because of us, Harlan." All that was left of her lipstick was an orange outline. Her mouth wouldn't stop moving. The wind blew the tall and browning corn. A flock of crows rose from the field. The weather, the scenery, everything was just a bit too sharp. I knew it from my time in the service and from years of trucking. Days like these were specially crafted for the worst kind of trouble. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Thank all 4 of you. Wonderful stuff. Also, in recognition of the high quality of the entries across the board in all categories, we have awarded an honorable mention to one book in each. First of all, in independent nonfiction, that honor goes to Sarah Chadwick for The Sweetness of Venus. Congratulations, Sarah, and welcome. Your topic is eye-catching and fascinating. Would you mind giving us a brief thumbnail sketch of The Sweetness of Venus?
First of all, I would like to say thank you very much, CWA and judges, for championing a book on a topic that by many has been considered controversial and taboo, because the award makes a huge difference to my credibility and the book's visibility. The book explores a history of attitudes to female sexual agency and desire, and it takes the lens of the clitoris. The title, The Sweetness of Venus, comes from a male anatomist in 1559 who declared that he had discovered this part of the female anatomy. And he said, as soon as I have discovered it, I should be able to give it a name, and it should be called The Love or Sweetness of Venus. And the book explores how we have come to lose such a loving and descriptive term for what is just an anatomical body part that today still remains a taboo. So thank you for being brave enough to say this is not a niche topic, and we will give it some credit, because I can't tell you what a difference that makes to my book.
And thank you. Sarah wrote in her own hand in the front of the book, so we would know this is not a joke. This is very serious, and it is indeed. In independent fiction, honorable mention goes to The Wisdom of the Flock by Stephen Gnatz, about the fascinating intersection of the lives of Benjamin Franklin and Franz Mesmer, from whom we take the words mesmerizing and mesmerism. Welcome, Stephen, and congratulations.
Thank you very much, and thank you
But
to.
you did tell me to say Steve, so I'm going to say it again. Welcome, Steve.
That's fine.
Congratulations.
Steve or Stephen. As I said before, I was only Stephen when I was in trouble. So The Wisdom of the Flock, you can't see it, it's going in and out of focus, is my book about, it's a historical fiction novel about Benjamin Franklin and the time that he was in France, 1776 to 1785. And it relates the story of how Franklin was asked by the king of France to investigate mesmerism, which was a popular medical technique, healed people. The French medical community was up in arms about it and wanted Mesmer strung up, basically, and run out of town. And Franklin did end up proving that mesmerism as a force did not exist. But there's a lot more to the story than that. There's spies, there's the American Revolution in the background, there's a love triangle that I invented as a part of the historical fiction. So I appreciate the honor of being the honorable mention in this category, and I appreciate the Chicago Writers Association for bestowing that honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. In traditional nonfiction, honorable mention is awarded to The Case of the Murderous Dr. Cream by Dean Jobb. Congratulations, Dean. If I'm not mistaken, you've been here before. You're not a stranger. Am I correct?
Well, thank you. Yes, my book Empire of Deception won in 2015, and I was fortunate enough to be in Chicago at that time. I wish I could be there now.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about the intriguing story of Dr. Cream.
Well, Dr. Thomas Neal Cream, his name is not well known today, but in his time, the late 1800s, he was one of the most prolific and fearsome serial killers of the age. He killed more people than Jack the Ripper. He killed more people than the famous H.H. Holmes of Chicago. He was a Canadian doctor who cut this path of murder over the course of 15 years. He killed in Canada, and then at the end of his career was killing in London, England. But it's very much a Chicago story because in 1880 to 81, he killed 3 women in Chicago, as well as a man in Northern Illinois in Belvedere. And so what I set out to do was to understand how this man could kill. He killed at least 10 people in 3 countries. And the subtitle is The Hunt for a Victorian Era Serial Killer, which was very much my focus. I wanted to understand how he got away with it for so long. And that led me into looking at the primitive state of forensics, the flaws in early detection, but also the absolute stifling and misogynist attitudes of Victorian society that allowed crime to prey mostly on young women.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Dean.
Thank you. Thank you to the association.
Dr. Cream, that's just one of the terrific titles amongst this year's submissions. Another is Coyote Loop by Elsie Fiore, and that's awarded honorable mention in the category of traditional fiction. Welcome, Elsie Fiore, and congratulations. Can you tell us just a little bit about your story?
Absolutely. My novel is Coyote Loop, and just want to thank the Chicago Writers Association for this honor. I'm in North Carolina now, but I very much consider myself a Chicago expat, so it's been nice tonight to be around my people. So good to see you all, and congratulations to the winners and finalists. Coyote Loop is the story of an options trader in Chicago at the peak of the Great Recession. He's a bachelor. He's divorced. His only friend is his clerk, who he grew up with, and he suddenly finds himself. Suddenly his estranged teenage daughter moves in with him, and it's sort of the story of them having to navigate that new relationship, against one of the larger financial crises of the century. It's a love song to Chicago. It's a love song in the way that maybe like Guns N' Roses would write a love song. It's kind of unusual in that way. It's at its heart, I think it's a father-daughter story. So, but thank you all very much. This has been a great honor. Great to be here.
Thank you. Well, congratulations to everyone here tonight. The judges have been unanimous in their praise of and enthusiasm for your work. We agree. Thank you to everyone who took part in the 2021 Chicago Writers Association Book Awards contest. And please look for us in the spring if you would like to take part in next year's contest. Entries will be accepted starting May 1st. Thanks.
Hey, Peter, can I chime in just a little bit here? First
Please
of all,
do.
I want to thank Peter for hosting this today. He did a great job. But I also want to note that CWA will be debuting a new podcast starting in February called Chicago Writes. And the first, it's going to be hosted by Bill Turk. And the first guests are all going to be our 4 first prize winners of the CWA Book Awards. So if you want to get to know these authors a little bit better, know their writing process, know more about their books, you'll be able to tune into our podcast starting next month. And I think it should be pretty exciting.
Thank you very much, Randy. And thank you all for being on screen and being here virtually. And good evening.
Thank you all.